Hello there. Welcome back to the channel. I'm your humble host, Taylor Coleman, and today we're going to be doing another episode of Onset Stories. In this episode, we're going to be talking about some of the anime shows that have personally and directly influenced me. So if that interests you, stick around for the intro, and when we come back, we'll go ahead on and get started. All right, guys, so welcome back to the channel. As I said earlier, I'm your humble host, Taylor Coleman. I am the CEO, lead writer, director, and producer at Crystal Ignition LLC. We are a small independent film and video production company located in Jacksonville, Florida. And on this channel, we do filmmaking commentary, a little bit of gaming here and there, and for the most part, we just talk filmmaking. So this is my series, Onset Stories, where I tell everyone a little bit about myself. The last episode, I went into the movies that influenced me, episode 1. So if you have not seen that, I highly recommend you check it out. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about just some of the anime shows that have influenced me. So before we get started, let me make some things clear. This is not meant to be like a definitive list of like the best anime in the world or something. These are just shows that personally that I feel like have influenced me in the way that I write screenplays, the way that I produce films and stuff like that. So if you don't see Cowboy Bebop or Trigun or something like that, Evangelion, and you're like, whoa, what kind of list is this? That's probably why. It's not because those shows are bad or I don't like them or something. I think that they're very good, very interesting. You know, Attack on Titan, all that kind of stuff, very good. It's just that this list is things that have directly influenced me as a creator. So yeah, with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead on and get started. So we're gonna kind of start with things that people probably already know about, and then we're gonna move to things that are probably a little bit more obscure. Put it to you that way. So Pokemon. I guess we'll start with Pokemon because everybody knows Pokemon. It's like one of the biggest franchises in the world. I enjoy it. We do play Pokemon on stream sometimes. We've been playing Pokemon Violet for a while now. We're getting ready to move to Starfield, so that's going to be very fun. But yeah, so Pokemon definitely has had an influence on me, aesthetics wise. The designs I really like. And there are two series that stick out to me in particular, Pokemon Advanced Battles or Advanced Challenge and the Diamond and Pearls. Let's see. Advanced Challenge. B tier. I'm going to put Advanced Challenge at B tier. Now, the way that I do these lists, things that I put in S tier are going to be things that you can go like in depth and do like in-depth analysis and talk about how this form of media shapes things outside of itself and what it has to say about the world that we live in today. Things that I'm going to put in A tier, I think, are things that are definitely have kind of an extra layer of narrative, but they're not quite in S tier. And anything below that is probably going to be for aesthetic reasons, or things that just, I guess, got me to think more about the media that I watched and how it's influenced me. So Pokemon definitely is going to go there more for the aesthetic reasons. This is a season of the show that I really like the designs. I really love the Pokemon. I really love the region in general. I believe this is the Hoenn region. And just a really good series. It could be nostalgia that has me like this because, you know, this is the series that I kind of grew up with, you know, around like 6, 7, 8 years old. This was the Pokemon that was airing at that time. So it could be that. But looking back on it as an adult, I really do still love this region. It's one of my favorites, one of my favorite teams that Ash has had. For those of you that don't know, my favorite Pokemon is Donphan or Phanpy, both of them. I like both of them. Those are my two like favorite Pokemon. I guess the third would be like a Tauros, but I don't think he used his Tauros in this season. So yeah, very good season. I'm gonna put it in B tier. Now Diamond and Pearl. No. C tier. I'm gonna put it in C tier. The reason why I'm gonna put Diamond and Pearl in C tier is because I feel like my love for this region is more from the games. I was very much into Pokemon Platinum, Pokemon Pearl. Um, Side note, I'm going to be doing one of my upcoming videos in this series is going to be on games. But um, yeah, very much from the video games. That lake music, like that, I believe Lake Acuity, when you first leave like your first town in Pearl or Platinum. Um, yeah, that stuff is like burned into my memory. Very good game, very beautiful soundtrack. Winter, that's like one of my favorite times of the year. I love winter. Um, Favorite time of the year, and yeah, I think that's what kind of makes Pokemon Pearl stand out to me. Diamond and Pearl. Um, but with that being said, I did not like a lot of the designs. I like the starters; they're cool. There are some cool Pokemon, I think, like Pachirisu, Garchomp, those guys. They're pretty cool Pokemon. But for the most part, I definitely prefer advanced battles and Hoenn and like, Trico and Blaziken and all those guys. Like very cool Pokemon. That series is definitely gonna get a little bit higher than Diamond and Pearl for me. So moving on, let's talk some Yu-Gi-Oh. Now, for those of you that don't know, again, definitely join the Discord. If you want to chit chat, come over to the Twitch channel. We have played Yu Gi Oh before. I am a Yu Gi Oh player. I do play this game in real life, like the actual TCG, not just like the Master Duel video game. I've been playing for about 5 years, and I used to play a lot as a kid, but not like the TCG like competitively. I play like very amateur ish. I guess that's the right word. I don't know. Um, so yes, I do play this game. For those Yu-Gi-Oh fans in the audience, they're like, "Whoa, what decks does he play?" I play Labyrinth. That's kind of like my strongest, newest deck that I play. I briefly played Sky Striker before Engage was banned. Um, my weaker decks, though, because I'm a Yugi boomer, so I tend to play those. And out of all of my like weaker decks, I play Dark Magician and Cyber Dragons the most. Those are like my two kind of um, decks that you'll often see me with, to a lesser extent, but I'm still kind of testing it. Is Cold Talkers. I do like Cold Talkers, and I mean, if you're looking at the shows on this list, you probably know why. Um, but yeah, I do actually play the game. When it comes to the show, I have some interesting thoughts. Excuse me. So let's see where I'm gonna put everything. Let's start with the original Yu-Gi-Oh. C tier. I'm gonna put the first Yu-Gi-Oh in C tier. Now I'm sure I'm gonna get a lot of furious comments for this one, but again, this is not to say that this is a bad show at all. I think this is a classic anime. If you have not seen the original Yu-Gi-Oh, it's something you definitely need to check out. With that being said, as far as its impact on me personally, definitely the game is definitely very fun. Definitely the art style and the character designs and their outfits and that kind of like edgy, sharp look I really like. But there isn't much that I can say about the story here that really impacted me personally. I thought it was very cool. Like many of you, I was sad, but I also it was pretty cool to see a Tim leave and to see Yugi finally become the duelist that he was meant to be and find his confidence. So really good show, really good show, really good seasons, really cool monsters and battles and whatnot. But for me personally, I'm gonna have to put this one in C tier. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh GX, however, B tier. And again, I'm seeing some comparisons here with Pokemon. It could be nostalgia. Again, this is one of those shows, Yu-Gi-Oh GX, where I very clearly remember like my dad would pick me up from school, go to the gas station, grab some snacks, go home, and while I'm sitting there, if I had homework to do the homework in front of the TV. If not, kick my feet up with my snacks, watch TV, and 9 times out of 10, Yu-Gi-Oh GX was on right there in the evening time, right after school. On Cartoon Network. I don't remember if it was on Toonami, but I know for a fact it was on Cartoon Network. Um, and yeah, one of those shows I grew up with. Looking back on it as an adult, however, and in rewatches that I did a couple years ago, like 3 years ago, this show is very dark. This show is very dark. Yu-Gi-Oh GX gets into some very serious topics, and I appreciate stuff like that. Not quite to the extent that I can put it in S tier because it is its own self-contained thing. Um, but very, very deep interpersonal conflicts and whatnot, and seeing Jaden kind of lose that passion that he had for dueling and take everything way too seriously, and then have to get that back was really interesting to watch. So for me personally, I'm going to put this slightly above the original Yu-Gi-Oh, but again, they're both very good shows. If you haven't seen them, watch them. Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds. Oh boy. Straight S tier. Straight S tier. Now you might be saying, whoa, S tier. I thought that was reserved for things that speaks to the world that we live in. Yes, you're correct. Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds does do that. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds, for those of you that don't know, let me explain to you what this show is about. It takes place in the future of the same city as the original Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's way in the future, and the city has been kind of divided. So you have this outside part of New Domino, as they call it, and it's where the second-class citizens live, the criminals, as they call them, and they are forced to do labor all day long for the benefit of the elite that live in the actual city. So that's why Yusei has those weird markings, because those are actually like prison tattoos to denote that he is a prisoner. They're not allowed to duel. They're not allowed to have cards, and they're not allowed to have duel runners, which are these motorcycles they ride around in, which is kind of the gimmick of that series. So very, very deep class inequality. I don't know what to tell you, but that very clearly mirrors a lot of what's going on in real life today. So, you say he has a past, he has a reason for being there. I'm not going to spoil it here, but long story short, he cobbles together his own deck, his own junk deck, from cards that he'll find sometimes in the trash, like one-off cards, and he'll hide them and keep them. And he takes little parts here and there because he is a insanely intelligent engineer. This is a very smart guy. So he'll take parts, and he's been secretly building his own dual runner motorcycle. So when we first meet him in that first episode, he's finally finished it. He's got his own deck of cards. He has his own motorcycle, and he journeys to the city to do plot things that I'm not going to mention here because, again, I want you to watch this. But very clearly, this show speaks to inequality. In, I guess you could say, Western nations. Lots of little comments here and there that speak to that. Yusei goes to prison multiple times. He's chased by the police, and this show really is social commentary. That's all I'm gonna say about it. But I'm gonna put it straight in S tier. If you haven't seen it, watch it. As far as designs are concerned, monsters, I don't really like most of them. I'm not like a synchro player. I don't really do synchro summons, but the soundtrack for this show is definitely memorable. And definitely the narrative is what's gonna catapult the show straight into S tier for me. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. This is another one that I'm gonna go ahead on and put in S tier for me. The soundtrack, Playmaker's theme, all 3 seasons. I have most of the soundtrack on my phone. I listen to it a lot. Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains is a very good show. Social commentary. Let's talk about this for a second. So Yusaku, the protagonist of this show, he was kidnapped as a child and he was tortured. So he would be shocked repeatedly if he didn't win a duel, and he would be starved. So he was basically taught that he has to win. Like if he doesn't win, he's not going to eat that day. If he loses a bunch of times, he's going to get shocked a bunch of times. So yeah, he was basically trained to be like this elite duelist and experimented on. And then, of course, one day he was saved, but now he still deals with the trauma of what happened to him. And he's become this, super secret hero on the internet that calls himself the Playmaker. So already we're getting into some heavy themes of things that people are talking about today, with like male loneliness, skyrocketing rates of anxiety, skyrocketing rates of depression. I think that this is a character that lots of people, myself included, can relate to for many different reasons on many different levels. So, that's I love stuff like that. Another character that sticks out to me is Go. He's like a wrestler. Apparently, I believe he was an orphan as a child, but now he takes care of orphans. Stuff like that I really think takes a show to another level. Um, while still kind of doing its thing. At the end of the day, it's a show about selling cards to children. Like, let's call it what it is. We know exactly what's going on. But that extra layer of narrative, that extra step, I love stuff like that. So I'm going to put Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrain in S tier. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Moving on. So to kind of round out our last kind of, I guess, series of anime that people have probably already seen in like the Western sphere as children, probably watching as on Cartoon Network, Bakugan. So yes, Bakugan is on this list. I had to put it on this list because this is like one of those fundamental shows for me. I was very much into Bakugan, way over like Pokemon and like Yu-Gi-Oh and all that. When I got into Bakugan, I was into this stuff for years. And to a certain extent, I still am. I have not played the new game. I tried to get into it, but I don't really know anyone that plays Bakugan anymore. It's just not very popular. I don't think it. I haven't heard anyone talk about it in a while. So I think Bakugan is. I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like it's in a good place. But it was one of those shows that really did stick with me. And yeah, let's put this series on the list. Bakugan Season 1. B tier. Straight B tier. I don't think it says much about the world that we live in today. I think that it's very much like teen, like young adult, like melodrama-ish going on. Lots of like interpersonal conflicts amongst the battle brawlers themselves. And very much like a coming of age type story, which I do appreciate those kinds of things. But definitely not something I can put in S tier. Really, honestly, it could go in A tier just for the fact that I love the designs. I love pretty much all the Bakugan in season 1 have very cool designs. They stick out into my brain. Drago, the Fear Ripper, Saurus. What was the other one? There's like one that's like a turtle. They're all like really cool. In a way that's not like Pokemon. It really is different. So I appreciate that. But for now, I'm going to put it in B tier. It's kind of in B tier for me. But again, very good soundtrack. Very cool designs. If you haven't seen the original Bakugan, check it out. It's like a meme. Like The Simpsons made the jokes about it and whatnot. But like it is actually pretty cool show. And that's also a pretty fun game if you have some of the original Bakugan and you try it out. New Vestroia. Now, this is the one I'm going to have to put in A tier. Oh, we cut out for a second. This is the one I'm going to have to put in A tier. Definitely the designs. This is a show that I actually rewatched in my teenage years. It was so good. I felt like this show really did have an impact on me. Again, it is still kind of more of a coming of age, young adult type thing. Lots of melodrama when you think about Mira and her brother Spectra and their kind of conflict, and Drago and Dan going through their stuff. Very much more of that, but for this show, personally, it does hold a special place in my heart. For those of you in the Discord, I'm gonna drop the Discord again. I have to shamelessly plug the Discord. Elfin, she is my Xbox gamer tag. For those of you that don't know, so like that right there should tell you that this show holds a special place in my heart. So I can't really put it in S tier. Just not quite there, but it is a really good show. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Now these two, Mechtanium Surge and Gundalian Invaders. Straight up, C tier. I'm not gonna drop them lower, but the show definitely did fall off for me. I completely missed some episodes of both of these series. I remember the highlights, Marucho becoming leader and some other things, but yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this show. I felt like it was very much veered into that just buy our toys. For me personally, So yeah, I'm gonna put these two down in C tier. It started to get kind of repetitive for me personally, but Bakugan is still a cool franchise if you haven't checked it out. I have not watched the last series that they made. I feel like that one is straight up just for like 7 year olds. I don't really have a desire to watch it, but leave a comment down below and tell me um, if it's worth watching. I will check it out. If you guys tell me to check it out, I will do that. But from what I can gather, it's not really worth watching. Um, and yeah, that's going to do it for Bakugan. So moving on now, we're going to get into some of the shows that were on the amazing, absolutely awesome Toonami block. So for all you young kids that might not know what Toonami was, way back in the day in like the early 2000s, um, they had an anime block on Cartoon Network where they kind of imported some very popular Japanese animations and dubbed them. Before that, they had something else with like this guy named Multor. I believe his voice actor just recently passed away, so rest in peace. But that was kind of like the original block where they would show anime, and then they made a new thing called Toonami. It's hosted by this robot called Tom. He flies on the ship and he streams like beams out the anime, and he has his own personal story. I believe we're on Tom number 5 now. It's I have not watched Toonami since like I want to say freshman year of high school, like around freshman and sophomore year. So it's been a long time since I watched Toonami. But yeah, a lot of these shows appeared on there, so I guess we'll start getting some of those out of the way. Um, let's start with Blue Dragon, because I think this one is obscure, sort of, but it does fall into that category of being like kind of something that I think a lot of you might remember just from the games. So let's get into what Blue Dragon is. The art style is by the same artist that did Dragon Ball Z, so it looks very familiar. I believe a lot of people kind of don't like the show for that reason. Um, Also, just for the fact that it really is kind of childish. I'll put it to you that way. But Blue Dragon, where am I gonna put this on the list? Um, I'm gonna put it in B tier. I'm gonna put it in B tier. Um, so Blue Dragon, what is it about? What is this show about? Um, so you have this protagonist. His name is Shu, um, and he lives in this land where there's this deep inequality. You have a king that rules over everybody, and he is comically evil. So you know exactly what that means. He's just evil just because he's evil, and yeah, everyone's like poor and subjugated. Well, his little village gets attacked, and he's already an orphan, but he's very hard headed, so he runs into battle. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I know that his powers unlocked and his shadow turned into a giant blue dragon. So that's kind of the gimmick, the theme. For those of you that have seen JoJo, it's kind of like that, where they have like a shadow pop out of the ground from their actual shadow, and it's like a giant monster. And the blue dragon is supposed to be like the strongest one, so he's the protagonist. Um, some kind of legend. He meets with a woman named Zola, who is a shadow user as well, and she's pretty strong. And she kind of takes all these kids and like she collects them, and they all have their shadow powers, and she like trains them under the guise of defeating this evil, comically evil king. Now I'm not gonna get into it because this show has some twists and turns that I really appreciate, which is why I'm putting it in B tier. Um, it's a very good show. Soundtrack, The Land Shark is Coming is like one of the main songs that sticks out to me. It plays every time they get into a battle or a fight. Just aesthetically pleasing to me personally. Now, as far as the storyline, again, you've got like a little bit of fan service in there, that kind of stuff. Kind of childish at times, but I still think that it is a pretty decent anime. So I had to put this on the list because it definitely has had an impact on me. Personally, it's kind of stuck into my brain. I've rewatched it like twice, I believe. Very good show. Moving on. Let's do I.G.P.X. Where am I going to put I.G.P.X? And then I'll explain what this show is. A tier. I'm gonna put it in A tier. Now, you could make the argument that it should go in S tier. What is I.G.P.X about? I.G.P.X stands for the Immortal Grand Prix. It's a show that takes place way in the future, and it's this competition that they do. So there's these massive racetracks that are kind of built over the city, and on them they have teams of robots that they like race on the track. So they have like these skis on the robot's feet, and they like race super fast down this track. And they like have to fight each other and like wrestle for position, but they also have to be first to cross that racetrack. So very very interesting concept. For those of you that don't know, this was the first Toonami show, I believe, that was like originally created for Toonami for Western audiences. You had a like massive budget. They had Steve Bloom, they had Mark Hamill. Just a very, very interesting show. I'm definitely going to put it in A tier. That stuff I was telling you about with the racetrack, again, you could maybe make the argument that this is talking about like capitalism and, putting these teenagers in robots to race each other, the ethics of doing something like that. But from what I can remember, I don't remember that being like a main like focus of the plot of the show. So for that reason, I'm gonna put it in A tier. But the soundtrack, all the songs on the soundtrack come from indie artists, so I really appreciate that kind of stuff. The dialogue, like the like melodrama between the characters is actually interesting, and I think it's done in a very good way that isn't cringe. That's the right word. In particular, there's this one girl that our protagonist goes on a date with. Like he is, like he falls in love with her, and he asks her out on a date, and she says yes, and they go to get like ice cream, and it's like this French girl, and he really likes her, and he finds out that she's the leader of a team that they're going against, like at the last minute, basically. And, he tries to put up a fight against her on the racetrack, and she absolutely destroys him. So, that was pretty funny, man. Like, that was pretty cool. So I'm definitely gonna have to put this in A tier. It's a cool show. If you have not watched I.G.P.X, you need to watch it. It's only like, I want to say 26 episodes, I think. It's only like 2 seasons. It's a really good show. Check it out. So we're moving on. What are we gonna do next? Let's do Gundam Wing. That was another one that was on Toonami, and I kind of touched on it before in my last video. If you have not watched it, check it out. Gundam Wing. S tier. Gundam Wing for me personally is a classic. Gundam Wing for me is kind of what I think about when other people probably think like Evangelion or like Cowboy Bebop. For me personally, this one is a classic, but I cannot deny that it, as far as like the aesthetics, the characters, this is the one that's had the most impact on me, kind of in this genre. Not in my top three. I'm saving my top three for last, but it's definitely up there. So, what is Gundam about? Briefly, for people that don't know, there's this war going on between competing factions, political factions, and they have giant mechs and they fight each other. There's a scientist, and he creates this metal, like this kind of like coating, and he calls it, I believe, like Gundanium or like Gundalium or something like that. And when you coat one of these robots on it, it basically makes them almost like nearly indestructible. Laser beams just kind of like bounce off of them. And it's also, from what I gather, very light in the original Gundam, so it makes these particular robots move a little faster and whatnot. And in each different series, the Gundams usually have like different kinds of powers. Some of them they fight on different factions depending on the show, because it's not chronological. Each show kind of takes place, from what I gather, in its own universe with its own like competing factions and armies and whatnot. But at the core of the series, and one of the reasons why I do think Gundam is a must-watch, is that it is anti-war. So you're not really supposed to be like watching it like, oh yeah, more Gundams. No, the point is to say like, war is bad. Like war bad. That's supposed to be like the underlying theme of the entire franchise. So Gundam Wing in particular, You have this group of teenagers. They have Gundams, and they fight for these different colonies, and they're trying to end this war essentially. And Endless Waltz is kind of the ending, so to speak. I believe Endless Waltz is another kind of alternative timeline. Don't quote me on that. You would have to research that yourself. But definitely, Gundam Wing is the franchise that, for me, and from what I gather, is kind of credited as introducing American audiences to Gundam. Um, so it holds a special place in my heart. I really love Gundam, Gundam Wing. Sorry, um, this particular franchise, it's awesome. If you haven't seen it, you need to watch Gundam Wing. Endless Waltz is on my movie list, but again, you gotta check this out, man. The soundtrack, the anime, like the animation is hand drawn, I believe. It's still kind of in that era, so it's very beautiful, very smooth. And each Gundam, they all have, like they all have their own. Their pilots have their own personalities, and their unique abilities. And I think everyone kind of got their time to shine. And most importantly, that anti-war theme, I think, is front and center. It's not put on the back burner in favor of like other like seeing things blow up. I'll put it to you that way. So, S tier show. Moving on. Let's do Fully Cooley. Fully Cooley is on the list. You already know. Um S tier. This is another one that I'm going to put in to S tier. So what is Fully Cooley? What is this show about? Um so it's about this kid. He lives in this town that's kind of polluted. It's covered in like the smog, and there really are no economic opportunities. Um, After school, he kind of hangs out with his girlfriend. They'll hang out on like a bridge or like in this like giant field of grass and just lay there and talk or whatever. But like his life is pretty crappy. His dad runs like a store, but from what I gather, they are struggling too. And he starts having this issue where his head will like bulge out, and when we first meet him, guess what happens? His head explodes and a giant monster comes out of it. So this girl, she pulls up on a motorcycle swinging a guitar like it's a baseball bat, and and that is Haruko. And she fights these monsters, and she moves into the house. She gets a job, and it's kind of a coming of age story. So she's always kind of, you know, in a fan servicey way, playing around with the protagonist, like teasing him and whatnot. But they go on, adventures. You've got like governments that are after her because she's some kind of intergalactic spy, from what she tells him. Just a really like weird show. It's like very high energy. That's the best way I can describe it. But also just so memorable, so relatable. It's gonna go on S tier because again, it speaks to the world that we live in. How many young teenagers growing up in a place where there are no like economic opportunities and they have like no idea what they're gonna do. Um, how many of us live in households where you have a parent that's struggling economically. That kind of stuff is very relatable, and it's nice to see that kind of stuff in an anime show. And then you still have your action, and the fan service is done in a way where it's not like all like gets in the way of the plot. It's not like overwhelming and overbearing, and pointless, obviously, just to get you to stare at the screen. So Fully Cooley is a very good show, putting it in S tier for me. In the soundtrack, forgot to mention the soundtrack. It's by The Pillows. I think they've done the soundtrack for the sequels to the show. Um, I haven't listened to it yet, but The Pillows, they are awesome. The theme song for this show is awesome. Speaking of the sequels, they're not on this list. I have not watched them yet. I'm gonna get to it. I'm trying to wait until I can get all three on Blu-ray. I know I can get two of them together on Blu-ray. Um, so I'll wait for this last one to finish, and then I'll grab that one and check it out. Moving on to Panty and Stocking. Yes, Panty and Stocking is on this list. Um, I'm gonna have to put it in S tier. I'm gonna have to put it in S tier. Now you might be saying, "How dare you?" Panty and Stocking doesn't say much about the world that we live in, and you'd be correct. This show is a comedy, but the animation, the designs, the music from Teddy Lloyd, just how much this show doesn't take itself seriously, just how like sex positive this show is, and you don't really expect to see something like that from fan servicey type shows. This show is hilarious. It has to go in S tier for me. It has to go in S tier. This is a S tier show. If you have not seen Panty and Stocking, with Garter Belt, that's the actual title. Check it out. When I was in high school, this was the show. Like, there was this girl that used to sit behind me, in my Japanese class. Yes, I took Japanese in high school. And we used to talk about this show all the time. It's just absolutely hilarious. The premise. So what's going on here? Panty and Stocking are two angels that have been thrown out of heaven by God for their promiscuous activities. So yeah, they both like to sleep around, and God was like, "Nah, nah, you've got to like repent for your sins." So they go to Earth. They live in the church, and they fight demons in order to, like, I guess, redeem themselves at some point and gain access back into heaven. And as their name implies, they fight with their underwear. So her panties turn into pistols, and her stockings turn into swords, and they fight, and it's hilarious. But it's a comedy. It's a comedy. So this show is just absolutely hilarious. Trigger warning: if you don't like hard language or sexual themes, don't watch it. But for me, it's definitely a S tier show. Definitely has had an impact on me, and yeah, I have to put it in S tier. I just have to. Funny. Okay, so moving on. Cutie Honey. Now this one we're getting into very obscure stuff. Now this one and Panty and Stocking, they have definitely not appeared on Toonami. But yeah, Cutie Honey. Where am I gonna put this one? Straight D tier. Straight D tier. Honestly, I should put it in F tier. So what is Cutie Honey? This was a anime show from, I believe, like the 70s, 80s. Very popular. It's about this lady. She has powers, and her powers come from other people loving her. So that can imply a lot of things, but basically, she has her fans, and her fans give her power, and she has a sword, and she fights bad guys, and that's kind of the premise of it. Cutie Honey is kind of just this little OVA that was made. It's only like 3 episodes, and I guess they were trying to introduce this character to newer audiences and do like a new interpretation of Cutie Honey. But I barely understand the plot of this show. I barely remember anything from this show. I just remember like how absolutely insane these characters are. She's being followed around by like an agent and like this photographer dude. Her boss is like a massive pervert. Yeah, just uh, it's like you want to like the show. The theme song is interesting. The animation is very beautiful. But like, for me personally, the plot is all over the place, and it devolves more into look at me because fan service. But it's definitely gonna go on the list because it's burned into my memory. Like, it's burned in there. Like, I remember watching this and being like, what is this? What is this? But you know, uh it's there. So I put it on the list. It's there. Um Definitely more so than like your average Pokemon or Bakugan or whatever, which those are on the list too, but for different reasons. So yeah, D tier. Don't really recommend. um Deadman Wonderland. Now this is one that appeared on Toonami, and now we're really getting into like some of the top anime for me. Deadman Wonderland. Where am I putting this? S tier. This is the S tier show. So the show did not finish. Unfortunately, I believe one of the voice actors passed away, and also the creator became very ill, and she was just kind of unable to finish it. I believe the manga finished. Don't quote me on that. I'll look it up and put it somewhere below, like I usually do. Um, but just a very good show. What is the premise of Deadman Wonderland? So you have this main character. I forgot his name. I apologize. It's been a while. Um, he's in his classroom with his friends, and he's in school, having another boring day of school. And this mysterious red man appears floating outside the window. And well, he uses his powers, and he just absolutely murks everybody in the classroom. Like he takes them all out, except for our protagonist. So the police show up, as they do after these things happen. You know what I'm talking about. I shouldn't have said that. So the police show up after all this stuff happens, um, and they arrest him because obviously he did it, right? If that's not social commentary, I don't know what is. But yeah, that sounds par for the course. That sounds like a modern day police officer. They do that. So he's taken to prison and he's convicted and he's sentenced to go to the Deadman Wonderland, which is a prison, and you are forced to fight. So a lot of the inmates have these like blood powers. So what they can do is use their blood and turn it into different shapes and weapons, and they fight with it like that. So he's sent to prison. He does actually have powers, which he finds out he can shoot like little bolts of blood or something like that. But he's forced to fight every so many days. Um, when you lose, they kill you. So, this is just, ladies and gentlemen, everything in between. This is a commentary on like the modern day prison industrial complex, and the way that we punish those that we believe are guilty, and it's kind of taken to the extremes. I guess like something like a cyberpunk, like straight dystopia. Um, that kind of social commentary, I have to put that straight into S tier. That's a very serious issue, especially over here in the U.S. where we have the largest prison population in the world. Stuff like that really hits close to home. Um, and aside from that, it's just a very beautiful story. I know you all are looking at, I forget her name, but the girl in the white bodysuit. I promise you, there is not a lot of fan service in the show. Um, Certain moments here or there, but that's not present in this show at all. This show is absolutely brutal. There's actually more hard language. So if you don't like that kind of stuff, maybe don't look at this show. But it's a very good. It's only like 11 episodes, but I highly recommend it. And I highly recommend the series. Um, if you can get your hands on the manga, I'm trying to collect all of them because I want to have this. Um, Definitely do so. And just definitely a S tier show for me. Definitely stuck in my head. Definitely has stuck with me over the years. Moving on. Mm, Casshern Sins. Let's do Casshern. Um, S tier. I have to put Casshern in S tier. Um, so what is it about? Let's go ahead on and discuss that. Um, so it is a new retelling of an older anime that takes place in a dystopia. So it's, at some point in the future. And Casshern is this android that was created. So he kind of wanders about, from what I gather, and I know for a fact that his main enemy is the Breaking Boss in the original anime, which is like another android that's like super buffed out, and he's like leading this army against like humanity or something like that, and Casshern has to fight him. I'm not too familiar with that original series, so forgive me. You'd have to watch like another video on that, check it out, read about it or something. But Casshern Sins, however, this show right here, so it takes place in the future. Again, same kind of premise. And what we're told is that the world has been infected with this kind of plague called the ruin. So people kind of waste away and they die. There's no resources. People are starving. That kind of stuff. And there's one lady, one girl in particular. Again, it's been a while since I've seen this show, so I don't exactly remember her name. Um, but she has the power to heal. So I guess people kind of look to her, and she's the one that's kind of healing people, keeping them going, whatnot. One day, Casshern appears and he kills her straight up. So like all hope is lost basically. Um, the world falls even deeper into this ruin. In particular, the robots, the androids in this world, they die, they go out, they rust. They rust away. So Casshern, upon killing her, he gains the power to just never die. So no matter how brutal he's, beaten or stabbed or whatever, his body will heal. So he can't die. So he just kind of wanders about, and the show is really about him, trying to find his place, trying to figure out what his purpose is in the world. There's this little girl named Ringo, I believe. So he's kind of protecting her as he wanders. It's just a very beautiful show. The animation in particular sticks out to me. Um, it's very very beautiful, very beautiful. If you're looking something for something that's visually appealing to look at, I think Casshern is one of those shows. Now the fights, this is where I have to kind of critique it for a second. And you'll hear this from other people. It zooms into very weird angles when he's fighting. It's like if he kicks someone with his knee, the camera will like, or the artist will like draw it kind of like they're zooming into his knee, which is just weird. Like it's kind of jarring. Um, but aside from that, it's a very beautiful show. I'm gonna put it in S tier because I do think that this is an allegory for kind of humanity and where we are headed to in the future with the way that we continue to burn fossil fuels and tear down forests and whatnot for our own personal needs. Um, yeah, I think we'll definitely end up in the future that you see in Casshern if we don't do something about climate change and whatnot. So definitely, I'm putting it in S tier. It's going straight in S tier. So what next? The Promised Neverland. Oh boy, The Promised Neverland. This is another one that's gonna have to go straight into S tier, and I've been kind of saving the best for last, and we're getting to some of my top anime. But The Promised Neverland. What is this? So fun fact about me. My nephew, he's very much into anime. He loves like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto and all that stuff, and his girlfriend will come over, and he'll like watch One Piece or whatever with her. Like they're always watching these like really long animes. He's like very much into this stuff. Um, for me, I don't like anything that goes over like 50 episodes. Like if it goes over 50 episodes 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to watch it because ladies and gentlemen, I am working on a degree. I'm getting ready for to go to graduate school. I run a company. I don't have time to sit around and look at, anime or play video games. It's one of the reasons why I stream on Twitch, but a lot of times you'll see that I'm on vacation or streams are canceled because something comes up with the company or with school, and I'm just simply unable to do that. Um, so, The Promised Neverland. He was like, "Hey, you need to watch this anime. It's really good." And I was like, "How many episodes?" He was like, "Oh, I thought about you when I watched it because it's only like 11. There's a second season, but don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Just watch the first one." And I was like, "Okay." So what's the premise? You have these children. They live in the orphanage, and everything is very bright and sunny, and they study very hard, and they take tests and whatnot, and they're all waiting to be adopted. And there's this maid, like their mom, their mother, that takes care of them. And one day, a little girl named Bonnie, she gets adopted. So everyone's happy for her, and she puts on her little outfit and gets her little suitcase, and she walks to the front gate, which they are told to never go to. Keep that in mind. So Bonnie, she leaves behind her teddy bear. So the protagonist Emma and the other protagonist Norman, they notice this and they're like, "We have to go help her. We have to go give her her teddy bear." So they run to try and catch up with the mother and this little girl before they get to the front gate. Well, they get to that gate and they find Bonnie. let's just say that she's very much not alive, and this is very much not a normal orphanage. Um, so I don't want to spoil things because I want you guys to watch this, but essentially it's this survival story of these three children, and they're trying to escape this orphanage. And I'm not going to say why because, again, I want you guys to watch this. It's a very good show. Um, S tier, straight S tier, just for the screenwriting. That alone, you know, I can only imagine the challenge of trying to write something this serious while also making your characters still sound like they are just children, right? And I can't imagine trying to pull that off, but these writers do. This show has so much heart. The animation is beautiful. The music is beautiful. You really feel for these characters, and they pull no punches, man. Like with stuff like this, they you would think that they probably keep just a lot of it PG, and they do. There's no like hard language and whatnot, but it is just a very dark show. Um, Straight S tier. If you have not watched The Promised Neverland, it's a must see. It's a must see for everyone. Straight S tier. Straight S tier. Okay, so we're almost at my top 3 anime. We're almost there, guys. But there's one that this is gonna have to be top 4. The Leader. Uh, Straight S tier. I gotta put it in S tier. I was gonna put it in A tier for a different reason, but I'll get into that. The Leader. What is this about? Well, this is a political show, so this is not a political channel, but this is a political anime, so I have to mention it. Um, this is a more of a Chinese webtoon series, but it does have animation. A lot of people consider it to be anime. Um, The Leader. The Leader is an anime about Karl Marx and his history. So if you were ever wondering my political leanings, you probably already got a hint just from the shows that I've been talking about, and the issues I focus on, like climate change and prison and all that other good stuff. Um, yeah, that Karl Marx guy, I really like him, and that Lenin guy too. I really like those two. But this is a show about Karl Marx, so this is about his history, him growing up, meeting his wife, meeting Friedrich Engels, who he wrote a lot of his writings with. Friedrich Engels, Marx and Engels, and yeah, that's pretty much it. How they developed Marxism. So you get to see him like studying Hegel and Hegel's dialectics. So just a very good show, very good intro to Marxism for people that don't understand what that is, or listen to other narratives. And you'll see people say things like, "This show is propaganda." Well, ladies and gentlemen, this show is no more propaganda than Captain America running around with the shield talking about freedom or something in Avengers. This is a very good show. If you have not seen it, you need to watch it. My only criticism, and one of the reasons why you saw me hesitating for a second, was when just like how upbeat it is. Like it's weird. Like it has this very like positive, upbeat, like, yeah, I'm gonna study Hegel. Yeah, and this will be my tool to fight back. And it's like, okay, bro, like calm down for like calm down for a minute. Also the soundtrack, I could not get into it, like with those anime, like Japanese animes, they always make sure they come with like a banger of a theme and like a banger of an ending. Whereas this one, it has that kind of weird, like happy, positive thing, but like it's just weird. The way it's done, it's hard for me to describe. It's weird, but there's a lot of value in this show. Social commentary, talking about the plight of the working class. Yeah, I can relate to all of what they're talking about. There's this little boy in the show that's like, him and his father are arrested because some landlord buys the land, is like, oh, you can't collect sticks on my land. Does that not sound familiar to you? Um, this little girl, she tells Engels walks her home, and she's telling Engels about how she fell asleep in the factory, and somebody like nailed her ear in, the manager, so her ear is just like torn off. Like, you might be thinking, whoa, that's brutal. Stuff like that still happens today. For those of you that watch the news, we just had a situation with a little boy in a meat packing plant, teenager, that was killed, I believe. Um, so this stuff is very relevant. It's very important. And definitely check this anime out if you have not, and you're looking for something that's pretty serious. Also, if you have not done so, read some theory. Read Marx's Capital. Read Lenin in his uh, Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. He has some very good writings. Rosa Luxemburg. Um, Read some theory, guys. Check it out. I cannot stress that enough. And yeah, S tier. Um, okay, so now we are at my top 3 anime. So, ladies and gentlemen, everything in between, these are my favorite shows. These are the shows that have directly influenced me the most. When you watch my movies, you're probably gonna see a lot of callbacks potentially to some of these things. The style of writing that I do, my style of like cinematography. When you see the way that I like to shoot, you're gonna notice a lot from these 3 shows here. So these are my top 3 anime if you've ever wondered. Let's start with the Garo franchise. And I guess I have to mention like the entire franchise itself. It's one of my favorites, top 3. Um, so what is Garo? I want you to think about like the Flash or Arrow. Over here in America, it's kind of like that. It's a tokatsu. I believe that's what they're called. It's live action. It is kind of like Power Rangers, where it's like a character that puts on a suit of some sort that gives them powers, and they fight kind of like this villain of the week type thing that they have going on. So Garo, at an unspecified time in history, this portal opened up, and you have these beings from another dimension that come over called horrors. And what they do is they infiltrate someone's body when they are like deep into despair, like something bad has happened to you. So say like a loved one passes away, they'll kind of come, kind of um, think of like that kind of biblical interpretation of Satan or the Satan, where they'll kind of show up and be like, I can bring back the person you lost, or I can give you the power to get revenge on your boss, or something like that. So, um, if the person kind of falls and lets them in, so to speak, they'll take over your body, turn you into a monster, and typically they go around just eating people or causing chaos and mayhem and destruction and that sort of thing. So how does humanity fight these guys? Because apparently humanity was on the brink of extinction, and it felt like the horrors were just going to take over the world. Again, at an unspecified time in history, some knights, as they're called, they went into the horrors dimension, and they found out, we're not told how, that if you take some metal from their dimension and you craft it into armor, it hurts them, right? So they made this kind of like magical armor, which is why they're called Makai Knights, which is magic knight. And they fight back against these demons, and that's kind of the premise of the whole show. And typically in the show, you will follow the Golden Knight, which is supposed to be a bloodline of the strongest knights. So the Golden Knight is like the strongest one. Sometimes you'll see a younger Golden Knight or older one as they're doing their thing. So something to point out about the show before you watch it. It is kind of sexist. Some of the lore, the Makai alchemists. So women are allowed to be alchemists, but they're not allowed to be knights, which I think that's just kind of like pointlessly sexist. I don't know why the creators did that, but again, not my culture. That's Japan. That's just something that I should point out. But aside from that, there typically is just very good storylines with this show. Things that are like very relatable when it comes to dealing with trauma and whatnot. In this animation show, because we're talking anime, that stuff is like right at the forefront. Um, so you go through 3 different eras with the anime. You've got ancient Spain, you've got ancient Japan, and then the last one is, I believe that they call it like New Din City or something like that. But it's kind of like New York, modern day America, New York. And they kind of travel across, again, what looks like America, but they don't directly say that. Um, so let's start with the first one, Garo the Animation. I just spent like 10 minutes going on a spiel. I think you already know I was going to put this in S tier. Um, Garo the Animation takes place in ancient Spain. You follow Leon. He is the golden knight of this era, but he's a little different as he's this teenager. He's like 16, 17. But this is not a coming of age story, as you're probably expecting. This is more of a grappling with trauma type story. Um, I don't understand how this works. Maybe some of you in the comments can explain it to me, but he actually remembers being born, and his mother, she was kind of discovered to be this Makai alchemist, so she was burned at the stake. So she used the last of her power to protect Leon, and he actually remembers watching her burn at the stake. And of course, he was saved by, I believe, his uncle, German, Herman. I can't pronounce it right. Who trained him to be the Golden Knight. So just a beautiful show. Lots of sacrifice, but also just lots of like learning to deal with past traumas. Um, for that reason, I'm gonna put it into S tier. That kind of social commentary I think is very relevant today. Now the sequel. Um, this one takes place in ancient Japan. So a few decades later, different. You have totally different cast, new characters. Um, B tier. I love the aesthetics of this show. As far as the Garo franchise is concerned, I still love the battles. I think are really good. That kind of theme of dealing with trauma, and dealing with your vices and whatnot. That kind of stuff, I like. But for this show in particular, I think I'm gonna have to put it in B tier. Now you could make the argument that it should go in A tier because it has at least a lot of social commentary. Um, we're told that the emperor, they actually know of the conflict between the Makai Knights and the Hordes. They have the writings and whatnot. So they have Makai alchemists that have sealed off their uh their their temple. But everyone else, the poors, the peasants, they have to live outside where there are, lots of horrors, lots of dangers. So there's some lots of social commentary there, and for that reason, it maybe could go in A tier. But for me personally, I think the scripts for a lot of these episodes are just not very good. Some of the dialogue is very weird. The villain, uh, the villain goals, like what the villain in this show wants, is kind of muddy. It's like very hard to remember, very unclear. Um, and then the character of Sime is just really weird. The Golden Knight, his past, it's very like muddy, like it just doesn't feel very cohesive as a show. It just feels kind of very over the place. Um, so yeah, for that reason, I'm gonna have to put it into B tier. But it's a very beautiful animation. I'll tell you that much. It is a Garo show, so there are like really cool fights and whatnot. Vanishing Line, A tier. This is one I'm gonna have to put in A tier. Um, you could make the argument that it should go in S tier. It has that social commentary as far as um, the girl character. The protagonist is her like trying to find her brother, and the only thing that she remembers is like El Dorado or something like that he like texted her or something. You could maybe make the argument that should go in S tier, but for me, it's just gonna go straight into A tier. Why do I like this show? The soundtrack. It has like this very heavy metal, like grunge kind of soundtrack. Um, just beautiful, beautiful animations, and it takes so many risks. With the Golden Knights in particular, you typically see like a middle-aged and or teenage Japanese male that's usually very slender or kind of like average build. But they're just like highly skilled and trained with the sword. This This Golden Knight, this dude is like roared it out. Like he stays in the gym. He's just absolutely massive. He eats a lot. Like he's busting out of his clothes. Like he puts on a suit and the dude like can't even like button up the suit because his muscles are so huge. He's just like, comically like buff dude. And when he turns into the Golden Knight, he doesn't use a sword. He just prefers to like punch the enemy, and the sword is kind of like an afterthought. So it's just really cool to see like that something very different. Like I love stuff like that where you take risks, and I mentioned this in my last video about movies. When movies will take risks, kind of like Cloverfield, where it's like, no, I want you to pretend that you're not a cinematographer, that you're like a normal person, and you're like, trying to film something, but you're kind of shaking around. I want this to look like a home movie. Stuff like that I just absolutely adore. I love it. So A tier. So now we're at our top two. My top two, like I guess franchises, but anime. Um, the Big O and Eureka 7. These are my top two. Now I'm sure you all want to know like which one is my top number one. And you could probably already guess it, but here we go. The number two spot, my top two anime is gonna go to the Big O. It's gonna go to the Big O. And I'm gonna put it straight in S tier already. You already know that. So what is the Big O about? Let me explain. It takes place in a world called, in a city called Paradigm City. So what we're told is that the world is a kind of destroyed. It's a dystopia. We don't even really know what is outside of the city because typically people will venture outside the city and they'll never be seen again. They won't come back. And I'm not going to explain why. We're kind of told why, but I'm not going to say it here because I want people to watch this. But we follow this man named Roger Smith. He's a negotiator, so he's typically sent on like these, negotiations between like powerful businessmen or like, gangs and like kidnap people and whatnot. And he tells us that 40 years ago, at an unspecified time, everyone lost their memories. Now in the manga, because I have all 6 volumes of the manga, it's a little different. We're kind of told that people will just lose their memories out of nowhere. Like people will be walking down the street, and then all of a sudden they'll like gaze at other people, and you can kind of tell like, okay, that person just lost all their memories, so they don't know where they are or what's going on. So yeah, everyone lost their memories, and the main issue here is that there's just rampant inequality. So there's what's called these domes, and there's these big, like massive glass domes that are built over the city centers. Inside the domes, you have wealthy people that live there. So really rich people, and it's very safe. So you have the military police that patrol, and they keep everything in order. Outside the domes, it's just more of like the just destroyed earth, I guess you could say. You've got buildings that have collapsed onto each other, and just rampant poverty. Everyone is poor, everyone's broke. And I think you can see where I'm going with this. The main issue in this franchise is that every once in a while, a giant robot or a giant monster will awaken just for no reason and start destroying things, typically outside the domes. So, Roger Smith, he lives outside the domes, and he doesn't know how he got it, where it came from, any of that stuff. But he has a giant robot of his own, and that giant robot is named the Big O. So you already know what time of day it is. When one of these monsters appears and starts attacking, the poors, right, and the military police is unable to deal with it, he screams into his watch, and then Big O flies up from beneath the surface, and he fights these giant monsters. And that's kind of the premise of the show. So each episode will kind of be like a monster of the week type thing, but it's just very much a mystery show. In the aesthetics, it has just like 1920s kind of noir thing going on, but it's just a very beautiful show. The Big O itself, the mechs, the villains that he fights, all of that stuff is still in that very much like 90s, 80s, hand drawn anime style. So the purples are just very beautiful, like the blacks, the purples on the big O. Just a very beautiful mech, like cool looking mech. Um, the voice acting, Steve Bloom, I believe, voices Roger Smith. Um, this show, the soundtrack, I have the entire soundtrack on my phone and I listen to this on the daily when I'm studying, everyone. This is just how much I love this anime. Um, it's just a beautiful anime. If you have not seen the Big O, the storyline, the soundtrack, the aesthetics, everything is just perfect to me. Um, and it's an S tier, so I have to reiterate this. It's very much a pro working class show. It speaks to rampant inequality. It's taken to the extreme because it's an anime that takes place in the dystopia, but um, you know, uh, the people, the rich people in the domes, the poorest outside. That says a lot about the world that we live in. Um, and Roger Smith in particular, because you could say, well, he's a rich guy that drives a car. Oh no, how is the big O repaired? Because the police are looking for him, and that's one of the conflicts in the show. His one of his good friends, Colonel Dawson, doesn't know that Roger Smith pilots the big O, and he's always like, "I'm gonna arrest whoever is in there." Um, how does the big O get repaired after fights? We're shown in season 2 that the poor working class, late at night, they'll come to Roger's house. Norman will pay them, he'll feed them, and they repair the big O. In another episode against the big bad, and so this is towards the end, and I'm not going to say who it is or what's going on. When Roger is fighting, he says, "Feel the people's rage." So he very much, uh, you know, uses the Big O as a symbol of empowerment for the working class in Paradigm City. His main kind of driving force is protecting the working class of Paradigm City. In the working class in the city, see the Big O as this symbol of like strength for fighting for them. That's why they don't say anything to the police. They cheer on the Big O when he comes out, but if it's just the police fighting, they're just kind of like you know whatever. So very good show. It's often been compared to Batman the Animated Series, but this is much better than Batman the Animated Series, just for the sole fact that it's not as problematic. With Batman, you've got just the rich man in a suit beating up mentally ill people, and he's mentally ill himself. So, we go back to that classic argument of like, Bruce Wayne could do more for Gotham if he just went to therapy and paid his taxes, which is kind of shown in Harley Quinn, which is just an amazing show if you haven't seen it. But yeah, watch the Big O. It's way better than Batman the Animated Series, in my opinion. And it's definitely up there with like Cowboy Bebop, Evangelion, Trigun. Very good show. Season 2, not as good as season 1, but still really good show. And now we're at my number 1 favorite anime show. And you probably could tell from the thumbnail because I've got waifus in the thumbnail. So, for all the newcomers that are gonna see them and click on the video, Eureka 7 or Eureka 7 or whatever you want to call it, Eureka 7, Psalms of Planets. This franchise, ladies and gentlemen, this franchise is kind of like the definitive anime for me. I don't think it could be made today, but I do think that it is just a very beautiful and very important anime show. So before I put it on a tier list, I guess I should tell you guys what it's about. So again, takes place on like a futuristic kind of Earth, a different timeline from our own. At a certain point in time, you had this meteor crash into the Earth, and it had these beings on it, and they're called the Scub Coral. So they're like aliens. So humans did what we do best. America does what it does best, which is, load up some iron and go out with the ships in the planes and attack it and bomb it and shoot it. So they tried to fight the Scub Coral, but it didn't work. Scub Coral decided to defend itself and very quickly overwhelmed the different governments and their militaries. So, we tried to study it because we're like, well, what is this? What are these weird creatures? Because when you don't attack it, it doesn't attack you. So they're studying it. This weird cocoon thing opens, and what do you know? What do you see in there? Waifus. you know, so the Scub Coral is making creatures that look human, essentially. The best way I can describe it. You can tell the difference because they have like very pasty skin, usually different colored hair. So like Erleka, Eureka, whatever, however you pronounce her name, um, her hair is blue. Anemone, her sister, her hair is pink. So they have different colored hair or whatnot. But yeah. Oh, and their eyes. Their eyes are like amethyst, so they have like a red line under it, but their eyes are like purple or something. This freaks out everybody. So humanity's like, nope, nope, we're not doing that. We're out. Uh, they turn very reactionary. I'll put it to you that way. Um, so they flee. They go to this other planet. And on this planet, it's kind of like Earth, but they have these particles. So these particles, you can like ride on them in the air. So that's kind of where the surfboard thing comes from, with the mechs, where like they'll have like a surfboard they throw down, and then it'll allow them to like fly on these particles through the sky. So it's also become like a sport for normal people that do it, how they just like fly around or whatever. So we follow a 14-year-old boy. His name is Renton Thurston. Kind of like Fooly Cooley, same kind of premise. He lives in a town. Um, he hates it, kind of hates his life. And for most people, um, their main kind of career path is go to school, go straight to the military. So if that's not social commentary already, just with episode one, I don't know what is. Um, so, he's at his grandpa's house, and he's just chilling. He's like, I wish I could leave this place, go join the Gecko State, which is like this faction that's fighting against the military. And he really just wants to escape and live a life that isn't boring. Well, this giant mech comes flying through his garage, and he goes out and he's like, hey, what the hell? Right. And the cockpit opens up, and what do you know? It's Erleka, Eureka, however you pronounce her name. I always pronounce it wrong. Um, she hops out and she's like, "Hey, can you help me? Fix my mech?" And he just immediately falls in love with her. Which don't don't do that. Don't do that. You don't fall in love with somebody you met like 5 minutes ago. That's just don't do that. But anyways, he falls in love with her. He decides to like follow her around, and it turns out when he's there, um, you know, the two of them can unlock this mech's special powers and whatnot. So they go on an adventure. He finds out that she works with Gecko State. He meets the leader, Holland. He joins up, and it's a coming of age story. It's a love story. It's a mystery uncovering the secrets of this world that they're on, the Scub Coral and all that good stuff. But there are two underlying themes in this show that underline the entire series. Number one, it is our resistance to change. That's kind of the one of the main things that comes out. And number two, it's going to be how we react to things that we don't understand. Those are the two primary things that underline everything else in the show. Again, I see a lot of people, especially fans of the franchise, that are hyper focused on the love story between Renton and Erleka because it's so much in at the forefront of everything going on and driving the plot forward. That kind of coming of age type thing. It is unique, I have to say. Seeing Renton kind of on the cusp of becoming a man, figuring out what that's about, and Erleka, because she's not really human, so she doesn't even understand the concept of love. She doesn't get what any of that even is. So watching these two come of age is, it's very good. There's not a lot of fan service. I think it's done in a way that's like just really well done. But yeah, as I was saying, those two underlying themes up under everything else, are at the forefront of it in my brain. It's one of the reasons why, as an adult, looking back on this, with 2 degrees in film, um, straight no, no, straight S tier, straight S tier. And if I could put it higher than that, I put it higher than that. This is a much watched show. Um, when I write screenplays, I think about this show all the time as far as, aesthetics and the way that I want to like frame my scenes, the way I want my characters to look. Um, Not so much of my upcoming short. This is a different thing. But in my movies in the future. Very important show to me. Very important. I have the Blu-ray of the whole show. I have all 6 volumes of the manga. I have the incredibly rare. For those of you that don't know, there's a light novel, but they are rare. They were only printed once. They're super expensive, super hard to come by. I have 2 of the volumes, working on getting the 3rd, and I should have all 4 of them by the end of the year. So that right there should tell you that this is a very important show to me. S tier. Straight S tier. Now I'm going to briefly, before we wrap up, touch on the sequel. That's all you need to know about that. Don't even worry about it. That's all you need to know about that. Don't even worry about that. It's going to go straight in D tier. But yeah, thanks for watching the video. I really appreciate it. If you stuck around all this time, I think we're like an hour and 20 minutes in. Oh my God, this is going to be an incredibly long video. I got a new mic. I'm using a new microphone, so if I sound okay, definitely let me know. If you hate it and you want me to go back to the other one, I will. My sound mixer, he got tired of me taking the Octava in the entire like blimp and boom pole and like just having it in front of my face. It was getting kind of annoying, so I went ahead on and got a straight up like podcast streaming mic. So again, hopefully the sound's good. And yeah, thanks for watching this episode of Onset Stories. I'll be back again. I'm going to do another one of these. I think next time we might talk video games or TV shows. I don't know. I'll put up a poll or something. If you like the video, like the video. If you dislike the video, dislike the video. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.